we didn't, like I say, money was scarce, but I'd call Dad and ask him if I could cash a check for $10, and that'd take care of everything.
When you came to Dallas or Fort Worth, did you try to meet up with the what we called the Tessies at TWU? Was it TWU back then? At Denton?
No, it was, gosh, I can't even call it, man.
Did it start with a C?
Yeah,
CIA.
I can't remember.
CIA.
What?
Was it CIA?
CIA.
Is that it? It's College for Industrial Arts or something?
No, it wasn't CIA. No.
But it was the precursor to TWU.
Yes, yes.
And
Oh, they loved to come to Dallas or Fort Worth, of course, and a lot of the cadets would invite them, and they would have dates there. We'd crowd into a hotel room, as many as we could get by with, you know, so it would be reasonable cost.
I remember the Baker Hotel and the Adolphus were places we stayed.
Right.
And put 10 of us in a room.
Yeah, they were choice.
Well, you were there during some really good football.
Absolutely
times.
the best.
The best. Tell us what it was like.
Well, it was a great thrill, and we were all so proud of that team, and we intended and expected to win the national championship the next year. And that was the most disappointing football game we ever went to, because the last game we were undefeated and played Texas University in Austin, big court trip, and they made a touchdown in the first few minutes of the game, and no other score was ever recorded. We were headed for the Rose Bowl, it was known, and that prevented it, of course. But I must say, A&M football kind of went in decline after I left there, and that cost me. I had a West Point commander initially, and by the way, he deployed overseas with us too. He commanded for quite a long time, and then he went to a higher headquarters in the same division. And he was very well aware of this A&M Texas rivalry, and I'd always bet with him on the game, and we were together for 4 years. And I paid him in dollars and Australian pounds and Filipino pesos and Japanese yen. We lost all those 4 years.
While you were there in the Corps, you were very successful and became the highest ranking officer as Corps Commander. Tell us about how you were able to do that and what that meant.
How I was able to do that, I've tried to figure out. Because, but consider this, I was a country boy from Kaufman County, but you know, when you get there and put that uniform on, you're all the same. But in reflecting, mainly in recent years, because I've been asked that question so much, I think it's because I was lucky enough to be noticed in a few things. In those days, we didn't have much supervision on the Corps from the military staff. We were organized by branches. We had instructors of infantry, instructors of artillery, instructors of cavalry, and so forth, and they kind of looked after the cadets. We had a tactical officer of the day. That's one regular Army officer who toured the area and took a look. The Corps ran itself. But these, particularly the senior instructors of these branches, of course, all of them wanted their branch to get that top job. I knew that. I came to know that. And they usually traded off. And we had, when I was a freshman, an artilleryman, a cadet colonel, and no, we had a cavalryman. My sophomore year, an artilleryman. My junior year, infantryman. And we would do a cavalryman or again and so forth, but I got it. Now,
Were you cavalry?
no, I was artillery. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was artillery. But when I say I think it's because I was noticed. My freshman year, I had 15 minutes of fame in defending the bonfire. Our freshmen had guard duty assigned, different outfits. My battery freshman had midnight to 2 o'clock one night. The bonfire in those days was on the main drill field. And we were there, I don't know, maybe a dozen of us. Before we left the dormitory, Mr. Bryant, Sr., who was our polo star, handed me a polo mallet. And he said, take this with you if you need it. Well, instead of the proper end thing on the end of it, it had about a pound of lead taped on it. So I felt real big, and I didn't have any idea that I'd need it, but I did. We saw from Westgate about 1:30 in the morning, something like that, 2 cars with their lights off, slowly coming onto the campus. And they, sure enough, they pulled up on the north side of the drill field and headed for us. And we, of course, got ready for whatever. And that first car had a guy hanging out with a can of gasoline. And when he came by me, I hit him right about there with that mallet. And that gasoline hit the ground and flashed onto several of the boys, my cohorts. The second car had a torch they were trying to light. And my buddies were really, really abusing them by the time that they got there. Now, if they'd ever lit that thing, we'd have had somebody set a fire. Yeah. We sure would. Anyway, we were told later that they went down to the all-night cafe in Bryan and sought a doctor for that broken arm. So when all this became known, we fished, had 15 minutes of freedom and fame. That was about the end of it.
Those were 2 carloads of T-sips, maybe?
T-sips, absolutely. Yeah. So that's one notice. My sophomore year, I was on the national ROTC championship football pistol team, lettered in pistol. Also, my sophomore year, we used to have a huge horse show there. You see, we were training on horses still. And people came from various states to that every year. And Colonel Beasley put me on a young horse to train for that show, and I worked her for weeks and weeks, and was on a 4-man hunter team, and we won blue ribbon. So Colonel Beasley was my senior instructor. And my junior year, I won or was awarded the Danforth Fellowship, which was a very prized thing. I don't know whether you're familiar with that at all or not, but Mr. Danforth, who created Purina Mills Feeds, very fine man, had 2 from A&M, but a student from each land-grant college in the United States, plus a Canadian from their agriculture school, for 2 weeks. We spent a week in 2 or 3 weeks. We spent a week in St. Louis at his headquarters and learned how to succeed in business. And then we spent the other time on Lake Michigan shoring up our moral and religious character and hearing more of the success stories, like people, I remember some of them. What was the famous trailer we used, big trailer behind trucks, the guy that invented and developed that, for example, the people who created some of the big cereal companies, so forth and so on. So we had a lecture every day, and every night we had camp and devotionals, really.
So you, because of those times that you think you got noticed,
I think people, yeah, I think that's all I can attribute to. Of course, I made good grades. That's a requisite thing, you know.
well, tell
But
us
that is the
about-
biggest honor I've ever had. I really, gosh, that's really big.
There's only one Corps commander out of every class. There's not too many of you, so that is a great honor. What was it like to lead the Corps? And you were always out in front and at every event? And
Well, of course, it was very satisfying, but it's very easy because we had 6 regimental commanders. We were all very compatible, and the Corps was just kind of ran on automatic. We didn't have many serious problems. We did have, you know, in those days, the senior court, we called it, in which the cadet colonel was president. The president of the senior class was a member, and then others were appointed. And the purpose of the senior court was to handle matters that maybe the company commander just wanted something done on it. It was beyond him, but it was below the commandant's authority. And very little of that was brought to our court. And it's quite different than it is now because we don't have all those regular Army officers supervising the outfits.
Well, I've talked to you about one of your classmates that I'm trying to find out more about, Henry Beville from
Yes.
Waco, and I found out recently that his best friend from Waco was Paul Haynes. And I think
Paul
that
was deputy
your
commander.
Deputy Corps commander.
Absolutely, and killed in Europe. Yeah.
In the Battle of the Bulge, maybe the tank.
I think it was in the Battle of the Bulge. Yeah, Paul was a wonderful guy, and I guess he was my cavalry competitor for that title. And I appreciate him very much and was very close to the family. And then right after World War II, you know, I came back on the military staff and became closer to the Haynes family.
At Texas A&M.
At A&M, yeah. And they brought his body back after when I was there. I thought that was a mistake because it tore him up all over.
I found out I have met some of his family recently and have yet to have an opportunity to sit down with them, but I mentioned to them that that I knew you, and they said, "Oh yeah, we remember that name. That was one of Paul's friends, and Paul was deputy corps commander,
Yeah.
and General Becker was corps commander." So I knew that you would be.
I have one more classmate that might help us. I don't have many classmates left, but I touched base with I think 3 of them. That see, this fellow was in B battery. I was in C battery. We were in the same dorm.
You talking about?
I'm talking about
Henry
Beville.
Beville.
Yeah, Beville.
Well, now that you got your commission, did you graduate and got your commission all at the same time, I assume, in May of '41?
Right.
And then you entered the Army at that point?
I did, and all my classmates, I think 6 exemptions were just allowed.
How many of the Army do you
There were a few over 500, I believe. And as I recall, 94 of them didn't come back. But no, I was I was ordered to the 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Bliss, Texas, El Paso. It was the one remaining horse cavalry division in the Army. I think we had about 8,000 or 10,000 horses. And
you were experienced at horsemanship because of being a country boy here on the farm?
oh
Is that
yes,
where you-
I was, and we had horses at A&M in the artillery, and down there. And by the way, that's my horse up there. And I wound up in helicopters, so as a helicopter pilot, but that's neither here nor there. I preferred the helicopter horsepower, I might add. And there were a bunch of Aggies in that division. And one time, there were about 40 A&M officers in that 1st Cavalry Division. That's a lot. And the class of 42, a dozen of them came to the Division Artillery. All of the A&M officers I ever knew were ready. See, we were branch trained before we left A&M, unlike now. And for example, in War II, right at the end of World War II, a few people had enough points to start going home, and we needed some officer replacements. We had some coming into the Division Artillery, and I just happened to be with the colonel, the commander, when his adjutant came in and had the records of maybe half a dozen or more officer replacements coming in. And he mentioned 3 of those were from A&M, or A&M officers. And he said, I'll take them sight unseen. He didn't even look at the records. But we were ready. Thank God we had ROTC. We never would have been able to mobilize in World War II like we did.
More officers from A&M than any other place.
And in the 1st Cav when I got there were officers from the 30s and on into the 40s. Very significant.
Well, tell us about your career in the Army, and where you went, and where it took you.
I had a fairly ordinary career, I think, except my service in wartime. I went to War II with this 1st Cavalry Division. We left our horses here. The division fought as infantry, and we were under General MacArthur, deployed to Australia, and the logistics capabilities were so poor that it took us 5 months to get into action. But we made the route all the way to Tokyo, through New Guinea and the other islands and the Philippines.
Marshalls, Solomons.
Well, no, that was General Admiral Nimitz Central Committee Command. MacArthur was Southwest Pacific Command, and Nimitz forces did those outlying islands, and MacArthur did. New Guinea is a big country itself, big piece of land. And then the Philippines, that was our major combat. And then we went into Tokyo and occupied there. And then I was in Vietnam with the 1st Cavalry Division. There was called the 1st Air Cavalry Division. Some people think that's Air Force, but it's because we had 450 helicopters for air mobility. And we used them for everything, not just to move troops and supplies. But I was very fortunate there because I happened to be a member of the study group that recommended that air mobile division, and then joined it to train it and test it and then go to war with it. And that's a very unusual experience. And we had just gotten to Vietnam when I was nominated for promotion to Brigadier General, and I was in command of the artillery at the time and moved up as Assistant Division Commander. There are 3 generals, in a division, Major General and 2 brigadiers. And they'd always, in this Air Mobile Division, all of them had been pilots. And I didn't necessarily want to be a pilot, but I thought back to my days in the Horse Cavalry, and I couldn't imagine a senior officer couldn't handle a horse. So I asked permission to train and qualify on the job. And dang, Chief Staff of the Army approved it.
And were you a general at that time?
Brigadier General.
So you
And,
applied for and was allowed to learn how to fly a helicopter as a brigadier?
Yes. Now, I thought that was important from the outlook of the men, you know.
If you were going to lead them, you needed
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
We had all these, we did everything through the air. But the main benefit from that training, and I filled a seat. I wasn't a very hot pilot, but I had a better one on my left. But the main benefit there, I was the assistant division commander for operations. And there's a tendency, if you're busy, you're really engaged, just keep going. But those helicopters, the maintenance is extremely important. You can imagine if you take off in an aircraft, you want to be able to get down with it. And so I never allowed that to get out of hand as an operator.
Tell us about you fought in the Philippines and the famous the Corregidor situation, and there was I guess General Moore.
General Moore
was there. Can you tell us about any of that? And
General Moore was General Moore was commandant my first 2 years at A&M, and when he was ordered to the Philippines, this is probably recorded.